Are you looking for an escape from manufactured truth wrapped in selfish agenda? Don't you just want to have a real and raw conversation, all masks and rules aside? That's what you're getting here at Titan Evolution Podcast. Get rid of all the nonsense information and discuss everything under the sun without filters. Listen to real stories of real people who will put your current perspectives to the test, guide you on living the life you truly want, and see everything free from judgment and pretenses. Time to get rid of those unhealthy environments and let your authentic self shine. Here are your hosts, Travis Johnson and Carol Carpenter.
Hey, welcome to the show. I am, of course, Travis Johnson. Somewhere on the screen, you're going to find Carol. She's amazing. She's my co-host. And we've got a special guest for you today, a real treat, a good friend of ours, Janet Hogan. Janet, how are you doing today?
I'm doing really well. Thank you, Travis. And thank you, Carol. Really happy to be here.
That might just be an automated response from a computer-generated Janet. We don't even know. It's like 2 a.m. in Bali. We're not even sure if she's really here. But if she is, I got to do the honor of giving her a little bit of an intro because she's done some amazing work. And it wasn't until her late 40s that she realized she was so discontent with everything that she had done. She had all of this. She made a lot of money and helped a lot of people, but really it wasn't her calling. And she got this deep down feeling that, Janice just let everyone down, that she's not operating as her true self, as a thing that really drives her and brings her to that next level. And over the next 20 years, she worked on this thing, and it's called The Fifth Door. I had the opportunity to go through The Fifth Door last year, and I had done years and years of counseling in different modalities, and The Fifth Door was the first thing that actually broke through this gruff exterior I have and got down to the core of what's my core destructive belief and what is the thing that's holding me back and why is it there and how do you fix it? Janet, it is absolutely nuts that your program was able to dial in on me, especially so quickly. I've never had that before.
Well, thank you, Travis. Yeah, I suppose I come from outside of the conventional personal development world, and I suppose as someone who's been on the receiving end of a whole bunch of programs and courses and, things to make you, give you the money mindset or, whatever, I guess money's often the entry into these programs because, when we have a lack of it, we want someone to fix us and turn us into an overnight gazillionaire. I think I came out of doing a whole bunch of those programs feeling really disillusioned with a distinct sense that no one gives a shit.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. You see coaching programs out there and every one of them starts at $5,000 and there's all of these things like, get the PDF and the course. And then, well, if you get this level of coaching, I really will give you the answer. And it seems like it's always this, I don't know what you would even call it, but it's like, it's like Puck, it's the false illusion of the promise. And you do the thing and no, it's over here now, and you go for it again and you get that feeling, but you never quite get it.
It's a dangling carrot as you go along, right?
Yep.
And you never really get to the carrot.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think our minds are so devious as well. They tell us that we're okay and we're fine. And that's the slippery slope. That's the piece I think that is the challenge for all of us. How do we get around our mind? And I realized, I suppose one of the ahas for me was that we don't. We can't beat our mind. The only thing that we can do is invite it to join the conversation. And when we do that, then that piece of us that would otherwise be like a self-saboteur, that tells us, oh, we're okay, or this person doesn't know what they're talking about, that tries to sidle out of deep confrontation, is actually willing to go along for the ride. I think when we start to say that there's a piece of us that's wrong or that we have to get rid of, like I'm based in Bali and there are a lot of saviors over here, and they'll say, hey man, you just got to get rid of your ego and then everything will be okay. And that's bullshit. I mean, why would you want to get rid of a piece of you that is there to serve a purpose? It's just that it's playing up too loud. So we have to bring all parts of us to the conversation and include everything. And I guess I work from the premise that there's no part of you that's bad. There's nothing wrong with you. We just need to bring to your awareness what might not be working for you right now.
Oh, yeah, that's a huge piece of it because the thing that helped me in whatever the situation was. That thing that helped me worked. In that moment, it protected me, it kept me safe, but it's no longer serving me. The thing that's trying
Mhm.
to protect me, I'm a grown ass man. I can do a lot of things. Why is
Yeah.
it that my feelings are trying to, keep me safe? Like it doesn't, when I was a kid, made all the sense in the world. All the sense in
Yeah.
the world. Either, you tell yourself a lie that covers you, you disassociate, you do all of these things and you feel good and safe at the time. 40 years later, you're still dealing with that same thing because it worked once and our brains love the thing that we can repeat easily and do again. And it's just running on automatic that until you actually challenge some of these things, do you find that it might no longer be serving you.
Yeah. Totally, Travis. That's exactly what it's like. And dissociation is such a fascinating ability that some of us, not all of us, but some of us have, to just literally pull ourselves out of a situation that feels really dangerous. And it's like we put ourselves in an army tank, but there's actually no war. But we stay in that tank, and then we wonder why we feel so lonely, so isolated, because we've never known life on the outside of that tank, to use a weird metaphor. But so you can understand it takes a lot to get someone who has been in a particularly, roller coaster, risky childhood, where you really do feel unsafe, to step outside of that machinery and go, it's okay for your naked feet to touch real ground. That's really scary. So yeah, we have to come up with ways to make someone feel okay to do that and make themselves vulnerable. And yeah, that, I suppose that requires a kind of sideways approach.
It
Yeah,
really
I think
does.
too, it's a curiosity. If we can go back to being children and nothing was dangerous to us because it was all curiosity and discovery. And so even in that fear, if we can kind of embrace that and move forward with it, then nothing should be scary. It should all be learning, and challenging yourself, because we don't learn just, and it's inherent in us. We want to learn to crawl. We want movement. And then from crawling, we want to walk. And then we take off like bats out of hell, right? And a lot of times brains aren't coming with it. So, so it has to come from that curiosity state. And I think we've all gotten jaded to it, and we are comfortable. And oh yeah, and we talk about, like, my girlfriends and I talk about abusive situations, women that keep going back and back to these situations. They know it's dangerous. They know it's not something that should be repeated, but it's comfortable. It's known, it's familiar. So they return to it. Right.
Yeah.
So if we can challenge ourselves and go, well, I know that's not the right thing to do. I know it's going to harm me. So why not change and make a different decision and discover what's on the other side? Because it's probably way better than what you're dealing with.
Yeah, well, this is where it gets interesting too, because if you do, like Travis was talking about, this thing called the core destructive belief, the best analogy for that I can think of is, like, if you imagine your house and
imagine you're
right,
a big fat house. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, pretend you are a house. Yeah, let's be a
Okay.
house. No, but imagine that at the foundation of that house, well, at the bottom of that house is a foundation, right? That you can't see, but you can maybe sense it slightly. And that eating away at that foundation is a termite colony, except you might only be dimly aware of it. But it is threatening your future self and how you're going to show up in life. And then when you think of a termite colony, actually, it's quite interesting, because where do all these termites come from? What propagates all those termites? Do they just come from nowhere? No, there's actually, like, you have a queen bee, there's a queen termite, and she's this big fat looking thing. She's like this big white grub, like Michelin Man, she's enormous, and her job is just to lie there, be fed by the worker termites, and lay eggs. And she lays about 3,000 eggs a day. And it's an interesting parallel with our own mind, because our own mind is propagating, well, probably more than 3,000 negative thoughts a day, but somewhere in that realm. I don't know how they count thoughts, but they say it's in the thousands, and most of them are negative. And so if you imagine that perhaps we might be structured the same way, where we have the equivalent of a queen termite, also known as core destructive belief, that's eating away at the foundations of our self-worth and our self-esteem. And what that means is not only can you not go back to that childhood state, but part of you is telling you yourself at a subconscious level that even if you could, you don't deserve it. Yeah.
Oh, that's brutal.
Yeah, it sure is. Well, when it's operating at a level that you can't even see, you just have this dim sense that, I'm not worthy, or I'm not lovable, or I'm not good enough,
It's like a black cloud that follows you.
It's crazy. When you think about it, it is insane that this is how we're wired.
Yeah.
It's just like Eeyore in Winnie the Pooh, right? Like he builds a new house and the rain comes and sweeps the house away. And he's like, well, I didn't like that house anyway,
and how many of us relate to Eeyore? Like he was my favorite character. He was kind of annoying. I was like, oh, can't you cheer up?
I like Tigger. Tigger was a happy, bouncy dude.
well, each character is an emotion.
Yeah,
each character is a specific emotion, and it's interesting to see which ones we identify with at one time or another. Like Piglet's scared of everything.
Yep.
Right. Yeah, it's so interesting how that works.
Do you want to hear something funny?
I do.
Kid, my it's not funny, but I named my first child, Christopher, after Christopher Robin.
Oh.
Because I loved Winnie the Pooh so much, right? And Tigger and all the characters, and I actually used to read that to him every single night. So that was, when we talk about this, it makes me laugh a little bit because, here I named Christopher, Chris, and he just, I don't know, he was, I think he was an example to me of a miracle, because I wasn't supposed to have kids. And then when I had him, he was like this miracle baby to me. And I was just like, oh, it's just Winnie the Pooh.
That's, I was just going to say, so I wonder what Winnie the Pooh represents. What aspect of art, because it's such a weird name to give a character in the first place, like Winnie the Pooh. I'm sure there's a meaning for that. Pooh in itself is kind of interesting. The concept of shit is interesting, because I think that's probably...
Well, isn't that P-O-O and not P-O-O-H?
That's right. Yeah, it's different spelling, but nice little segue here. But I suppose that's the part that fascinates me, that our shit, the stuff that we don't want to share. Which is where, in a physical level, we might call it our shit. And on a metaphysical level, I guess it's our shame. It's the part of us that we don't want to own. I find that's really interesting, going down beneath the floorboards and finding out, what's in that termite colony.
Yeah.
I'm just looking right now at all the different characters and what they have.
Winnie the Pooh. Yeah.
Winnie the Pooh can't stay focused. He's got ADHD. Piglet's depressed, right? Roo is on the autism spectrum. He prefers to sit quietly, rarely ventures out. Tigger is impulsive and hyperactive, of course, which is why Carol likes him so much.
Oh, great.
Eeyore obviously is depressed. Kanga, the mom, has social anxiety, and OCD is all about the rabbit, right? Everything's got its place. Everything's got to be where it goes.
Yeah, I probably relate to Kanga, not just because I'm an Aussie, but social anxiety, that's relatable.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. The owl is dyslexic, and because Christopher Robin is the only person, he's got schizophrenia, because these are all figments of his imagination.
Perfect.
So just to recap, Carol named her son after schizophrenia, which there's probably worse things to do, let's be honest.
No.
Well, I think what was beautiful about Christopher Robin was how they were all his friends. He didn't dislike one of them.
No,
well, that's right. Yeah, they were all parts of him that he was
exactly.
Yeah.
How often are we?
It was acceptance.
How often are we okay with all the different parts of ourselves?
Yeah.
True.
Absolutely not. And if Christopher Robin were most of us and had his own way, he would have, over time, got rid of every single one of those friends and not been able to be with himself, right?
And he would have been alone. And
would have
lonely.
been alone. Yeah. Yeah.
Jen, I gotta ask, you were able to do all this stuff. I gotta know what is it about you that makes you a Titan?
Oh, I think the fear of being a Titan, the endless battle that presents. Yeah. I feel that fear of my own greatness is what I've battled with all my life, and staying comfortable playing small. Yeah.
Did
That
anybody I guess in up till now, in your past, in your, even in currently in your present, did anybody kind of put you in that place where you needed to diminish yourself? Or was this something that just happened within you where you just felt like you couldn't shine fully?
Yeah, it's so interesting. That's such a great question, Carol. And it's funny when you get an inkling of what your fear might be. Isn't it weird how suddenly all the dots seem to join instantly? Our school motto, I'm a bit of a word nerd, and my favorite subject was Latin, which probably doesn't mean anything to anyone
I took
now.
4 years.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, we must talk. Anyway, salve, Pualai. But the our school motto is Lux Vestra, which just means let your light shine. And it didn't mean anything to me for so long. And then I realized, oh my God, that's exactly what I haven't done for most of my life. And unlike Travis, my childhood was relatively blessed, which can be its own dilemma. But I think in my case, probably my greatest role model was my dad. And he did great work, but he died a mystery to us all. He definitely threw himself on the altar of self-sacrifice. He was a surgeon, actually. He was known as Dr. Ears, and he did the first bionic or cochlear transplant on a baby in the world. So suffice to say, he was pretty good at what he did, and he was very dedicated. But he never took the limelight or never stood in the limelight. He always deferred to others. So now, 20 years later, after his death, very few people remember him. He kind of stayed in obscurity. And I think, so it wasn't so much someone suppressed me, but I think I followed in his footsteps, in the shadows, which is funny because that's where I kind of hang out, in people's shadows. Bringing light to the dark side. But so I think environment has a huge amount to do with how we turn out. And if we have role models, I used to do the hospital rounds with him on a Saturday morning. I loved doing that. And, medicine was never my path, but I just loved seeing how guys could sit in bed with blood-soaked bandages wrapped around their heads, smiling when they saw the doctor. I thought, wow, that's so cool, to be able to help someone at that level. But I think I cloaked myself in modesty for most of my life. And modesty is very nefarious, because we say that when we're modest, particularly women, when we toss away a compliment, when someone tries to tell us that we might be good at something, we go, oh, it's nothing. That's the ego showing up in a really devious kind of way. And I think I lived behind that mask for a long, long time.
But I think too, it's culture. Like in my culture, compliments were dismissed, and I know for my mother, she led by example, and she, just like your father did with you, if a man said, oh, you're beautiful, you dismiss it, because for my mother, she didn't want females in our family to be looked at as attractive because they had other traits, that had merit, like intelligence and, the ability to take care of others and be selfless. And so she taught me by example, and of just like your dad did with you, you just kind of fall in their footsteps because that's what you believe is the right thing to do, not understanding that in a way it works against you.
Yeah, that's so true. My dad used to come home every night and say, oh, they got their pound of flesh today. Like that was noble and worthy. And, because there's so much self-sacrifice with both genders, men and women. But I think if I was to say what upsets me most in the world, it's our ability to throw our lives away as if they were nothing and say that's okay. You know, men do it by going off to war, and women do it just by being women. And that to me is the human tragedy, that we never get to find out who we have the potential to become. And so I was lucky to have a near-death experience. I guess that was a formative thing for me, because
What age?
I was about 50, no, a little bit older than 50, actually. God, it's not even that long ago when I think about it. And I was just coming out of the back of the 2008 Great Recession, where we kind of lost everything. So there was so much shame around that event for me, because I took out a risky margin loan, trying to minimize our tax in a legal way, but it totally backfired as a strategy. So while everyone was losing, you know, I don't know, tens of thousands, we were losing like $100,000 a day. I don't know if you can, yeah, it was just like crazy stuff, because we were financially very successful. And so that basically gave me PTSD for a few months, where my synapses just wouldn't fire. And I remember, I can kind of smile at it now, but afterwards, when we emerged from that, so it would have been early 2009, we had this amazing house by the sea that we created. It was like a Richard Branson dream come true, you know, framed by palm trees. This is in Australia's equivalent of the Caribbean. You know, aqua tropical waters, little islands dotted around the horizon, private beach next door. And we had all of that, and no income, and a $5 million mortgage, and no one was buying properties in the Whit Sundays at that point. And that's when basically, that's when I wanted to check out. At that point, I thought, okay, we spent 30 years working really hard, nose to the grindstone, and this is where it's brought us, and it's all because of me. This is the ego, right, talking, all because of me. I'm such a bad person. And so, you know, it's that ego that does push us, or the unresolved shadow that does push us over the edge, or nearly over the edge in my case. And if we can pull ourselves back from that edge, and this is where humility, or just a little glimmer of hope, the real self starts to kick in, if we're fortunate enough to be able to do that. That's when the next step has to be, well, what the F is going on? Because the previous life didn't work for me. And that programming, you know, the self that took out the margin loan in the first place and wanted to go F you to the tax department wasn't working. So what the hell does work? And that's when I got to this point of just, you know, being a junkie for seminars and workshops, and built up a frustration that these guys don't even care, you know.
Yeah.
So I guess I saw in my dad someone who cared, who wanted to deliver an outcome. And given he was my role model, so I did go to one boot camp. It was a Face Your Fears boot camp, where in the Malaysian jungle, where you're throwing yourself out of trees, kind of proving that you're fearless. And none of that shifted the needle for me, actually. But there was one exercise where you go through a simulated death experience. And so just imagine you're standing there in a room, like a conference room, and there's a guy covered in tats, looks like a Hell's Angel, and he's walking towards you with this kind of weird grin on his face, and his hands outstretched, and he's about to squeeze your carotid arteries till you pass out. And they get you to sign, before you do this, you sign a disclaimer form that is literally like an old-fashioned phone book. It's about that thick, you know.
Just in case you die, you can't come
That's right.
or your
or you
family
come out
can't
of
come back and
vegetable or
sue.
something. Yeah.
Yeah.
All that. But, you know, part of me went, oh, this is a controlled situation. I'm sure they know what they're doing. So I wasn't too worried about that. It was more like, ooh, what's going to be on the other side? You know, light at the end of the tunnel, euphoria, life flashing before me. I was actually really curious. And then as I went down, I had a feeling of, ooh, and it was like a nausea. And then this voice just saying, oh, Janet, you've let everyone down. And then bang, out. And then as I came to remembering that, I went, so if this had been my real death, is that actually what I would have heard? That I've let everyone down? And the emotions that kind of just went bang, 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 bang at that point in kind of like a millisecond, you know, like absolute disappointment, full on outrage, self-righteousness, you know, how dare that wet sock of a line be the summation of my entire life? And then the big, oh, I know what this is about. I know what this is about. In you know, the thought that came to me was, in being selfless, sacrificing myself, being the good woman, the tireless worker, the perfect wife, all that stuff that we tell ourselves we have to be. I'd actually been selfish. It was a form of selfishness that I hadn't really understood up to that point, where I denied the world my true self, my gift. And I had no idea what that even was, but it was just a sense of, oh yeah, you've been playing small and you don't even, you think you had the big house, you think you had the private beach, you flick the bird at convention.
But that was you. That was you. That was being selfish for you, right? Now you get to share that gift with all these people. That's the true selflessness.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's getting out of your own way. But I suppose what it gave me, why that was such a wake-up call for me was, oh my God, what if I was like 90 and that was the thing that came to me just as I was drawing my final breath?
Oh dear God.
Can you imagine that?
No.
Can you imagine that?
What would overcome, you would be so overcome by guilt at that point, right? And I think these days people don't understand. I had this image that I played in my mind movie that was, believe you're born to do great things. And if each and every one of us could hold on to that and understand you weren't just randomly put into this world to just, I don't know, exist and not make an impact. Each and every one of us has the ability to achieve great things and affect this world in a very positive way. It's up to us to decide if we're going to do it and when, but that also means a lot of work because we carry a lot of baggage with us and we got to unload at some point and not carry that baggage anymore. But that requires a ton of work on yourself because we are conditioned from our past. And because, I have a different religion, so I believe in reincarnation. We carry baggage from that if we never let it go. So there's a lot of things to, unpack and sort through.
Exactly. And if we're talking about the unknown, that's the scary part for me, Carol, that, well, this is where I think fear of greatness kicks in. If I go back to my dad, I suppose I saw him as great and I saw him as an exhausted man. So part of me, my story would have been greatness equals exhaustion equals self-sacrifice. But he wasn't great in that sense that we're talking about, in that he was still the arrogant surgeon, right? He was still someone you couldn't talk to about anything medical. He hadn't crossed that threshold. And I guess that's where we're talking about the fifth door, Travis, that you mentioned in the beginning. The fifth door is what I call is the door that if you want to cross the threshold and enter the fifth door, essentially you have to get out of your own way and, see that there's something bigger than you in life, which is, where we find our meaning, when we can finally get out of our own way. And the irony there, and I probably only just realized this recently, is that place, that greatness has no weight. It's not a 10-ton burden, because the moment you articulate your vision and you say it's not about me is the moment everyone comes and joins you because they're inspired by whatever that greatness is. It's not about you. And so my dad, when he passed, it was in relative obscurity. I mean, he had a great funeral and lots of people came to it, but then quickly the memory was gone. But there was another doctor at the same time called Dr. Eyes, Fred Hollows, another Aussie guy, and he had crossed that threshold. So in other words, even though he was a great surgeon, it wasn't about him and how vast his patient list was. It was about his particular vision, which funnily enough was to restore vision to the eyes of people in developing countries. And he could do this operation for $20. So he set up a foundation. Wow. And so that he and my dad died at about the same time. But 20 years later, this guy's work is still going in the Fred Hollows Foundation. He's physically gone, but the people who, all the angels who flock to his assistance are still around. So that, if we can understand that our greatness isn't about us, it's about something greater than us, then we can go, so actually this is where I lighten up, not where I carry the weight like Eeyore, It's, that's the realization.
Interesting. Yeah. And what's sad is, you know, he did so much for so many people, and yet he's not remembered to even the
No.
same degree as the other
Yeah.
doctor, Dr. Holloway, correct?
Yeah, Hollows.
Yeah.
Yeah, no one. Yeah, I
Hollows,
think that
yeah.
I think that's the blessing of advertising. It taught me really quickly that no one cares. No one cares about you. So if you're searching for significance by people caring about you, if you go down the fame route, yeah, they might care about you in an unhealthy way, like they envy you. But then as soon as you're gone, you know, so what? So it's so refreshing to realize that no one really cares coming from an egoic sense. However, they can connect with you if they're coming from a place of love. And that's real, and nothing can destroy that. But to go there, we have to, you know,
Be
confront
bigger
love's
than yourself.
adversary. Yeah, we have to confront our fear. We have to confront the creator of that fear, the core destructive belief. So that's where it gets interesting.
Yeah, I know that from our work together, this show, the words that we used to describe this show, the Titan, came out of my work with you. And it's amazing. We're doing the shadow work. I didn't know how I viewed myself until we actually asked that question. Like, well, what do you think of Travis? In the instant that question was asked, there was no barriers. It was Travis as a Titan. And based on what we know about humility and all that stuff, like, you don't, even though it's true, you don't want to believe it. And if you do want to believe it, it's that scared feeling of you don't want to be larger than life, because you know that kind of behavior can feed your ego in a bad way. And that's scary.
Yeah, exactly. I remember when you came up with that, Travis, and you drew it before you said it. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I still have it in my notebook sitting right here.
And that was your inner self. That was love talking in that drawing. It was saying, you know, maybe Travis is ready to emerge from the shadows. And it was so beautiful to see that, you know, because deep down, we know who we are. And I think it's once you bring everyone on board, just like Christopher Robin did, he brought all the characters in his family on board. He didn't judge anyone. And if we can do the same with ourselves, you know, just because Eeyore's always sad doesn't make him a bad donkey, you know. That's just who he is. And if we can embrace all those aspects of us, you know, including our fear and that overprotective self, you know, the shadow, that's when we can stand up and not be, that's when we really become unassailable. You know, not from an egoic point, but from a point of, if someone doesn't like me as my authentic self, I'm fine with that. That's okay. We have
but
to,
I think it takes a lot to get there, don't you think? Because
absolutely.
we're afraid to embrace who we truly are, because we're afraid we're not going to be accepted. And if we can get over that and really allow ourselves to shine as the people we are, you know, what's interesting is, you're right. It actually is way lighter, because you're standing in your own shoes, walking your own path, and you're not carrying that weight of all the things you believe you should be doing, how you should act, you know, all the beliefs that you've carried from your past. When you walk in your own shoes, you shed all that. It's amazing.
Yeah. So true. And how easily, I mean, I know myself throwing sticks and stones at people who might have been doing good work, like Fred Hollows, going, yeah, but that's not me. I mean, I don't want to dedicate my life to saving people's sight. You know, he's one of those do-goody people.
But everybody has their own thing that they're going to contribute to the world. And that's your gift to the world.
And I think maybe one of the things also where we can misunderstand the concept of greatness is that we have to save the world, you know. And the people we tend to talk about who were great, you know, the JFKs and the Martin Luthers, they almost become caricatures of people who were vastly impactful. And we go, oh, that's greatness. Well, that's not for me. Well, what if greatness was just being there for one person, you know? What if that was greatness? Because I think maybe we need to reframe greatness. And
very true.
Otherwise it becomes too impossible, too distant, too not me.
Yeah.
Mm.
I really think the operating as yourself is the same thing as greatness. Because when you're
Yeah.
operating as your true self, all the ease of it all is what shows up, and that becomes the output of the inner work, the inner self. I've been doing a lot of work, as we've been mentioning, right, over the past year especially. And one of the things I got encouraged to do, I signed up in the fall, but I've been doing this improv class. And improv, they run you through all these different games. And I interviewed an improv guy a couple of years ago on my old show, and that came up as like 3 years ago on my timeline today. As I was looking through it this morning, I was like, I had such a great time. And it's such a great way. Yeah, I mean, like improv, don't like improv. But if you go to study it and you learn how to do the games, you're really learning how to let go of all those constraints that we have in our life. Oh, we're at different stations in life. Are we in different socioeconomic circles? Or we've got people that are in the military, the people that are attending bar, all these different types of people. And the last couple of weeks, the gal that's been teaching us has been telling me I do a good job. And last night I challenged her a little bit. I was like, are you just putting me on? Like, are you just saying that? She's like, no, like you're able to really fully be in it and let go of all this stuff. She's like, there's a couple of you in the group, and she mentioned the other name, but she's like, it's like when you're in the scene, like nothing else even exists. And that's where that magic comes in. And I'm able to be myself and do that play as an adult. It's a big game of make believe and pretend, right? It's Christopher Robin thinking of all his animal friends, but in the scene, whatever the constraints are, whatever they've said the rules are, you're operating within that, and nothing else in the world even exists. And it's so much fun, and it's so impactful, and you get laughs from the crowd. And oh man, I tell you what, I definitely get fueled by attention.
Yeah, but I'm going to say I want to join you. That sounds like a lot of fun. Yeah. So yeah, here's the thing. So it's a skill that you've acquired in the past because you have had that ability to pull yourself out of a situation and dissociate, right?
Mhm.
But now you're doing it consciously from the grounded self, and you're going, oh, I've actually been doing this all my life, but now I'm doing it as the Titan who's not scared of the unknown, and you're bringing all the characters in your life, Christopher Robin, you're bringing them around you and playing with them, and that's so cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
You get to control and design it now, because
that's right.
now you've
Control it and
stepped
design
into it. Yeah.
There's another movie, it's a little bit more recent, that came out that kind of deals with feelings. This movie called Inside Out. Have you guys seen this?
Mm-hmm.
It's got like anger, joy, or sadness, and envy. It's got all these little.
Is this the cartoon one?
The cartoon one, yeah, where they're all in the head.
That one, yeah, where they're all talking like it's like what is it? Like the control center.
Yeah, the control center.
Yes.
Lewis Black plays, anger, and he's so good at yelling. Like it's a lot of fun. But they're running around trying to find the core memories, right? This almost lines up exactly with what Janet does. And it wasn't until the end of the movie that they realized the role that sadness plays in the ecosystem of someone's life. Because even though they had those dark memories, the rainy, the Eeyores, right? They had all those. But as soon as it gets to the next scene, that sadness and actually expressing it is the thing that brought the family together to comfort her and make her feel safe again.
Yeah.
Well, we also need all emotions in order to really, understand. Like we talk about, especially in my culture, it's all about opposites, male, female, happiness, sadness, right? Good, evil, darkness, light. You can't fully appreciate one without experiencing the other.
Yeah. If every day was sunny, you lose the ability
to wouldn't appreciate it.
You recognize the ability of how wonderful that sunniness is. Maybe that's what's going on with San Diego. Like when they get their winter, it like rains for 3 days, and that's their winter.
Oh, boo-hoo. I can't really feel sad for them.
Well, that's very true. It's like living in Bali. It's always, 29 centigrade. So that's about 88 Fahrenheit. Yeah, always, give or take a degree. So no one talks about the weather because
Mhm.
it's like the fish in the fishbowl, the water never changes, right? The weather never changes. So you don't have that, that metaphoric winter that,
Yeah.
uh,
Well, there's a lot of
yes.
there's places like that. There's that Mediterranean weather that you're talking about. Like we had Lou Marinoff on. He was from Canada, and they don't talk about race things because everyone is essentially white, right? So
Uh-huh.
race isn't an
Yeah.
issue, not because it's not an
Yeah.
issue, but because there's no competing interest. There's no one in there
Yeah.
talking about it because it doesn't exist. It's interesting to see how that goes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They obviously
Yeah.
have not been to Vancouver or Victoria. It's a melting pot.
Right. I'm talking about the vast majority of there's two
Yeah.
big cities, right? There's two on the West Coast in Toronto and Quebec, but outside of that, everyone looks the same. And that's not an issue.
Milky white.
Yeah, that's not an issue in Canada. They
That's
might have
okay.
a
My
few, but
boyfriend is Canadian.
Mhm.
So yeah.
He's white.
Yeah.
Oh, milky white.
Milky. I'm writing that down.
No, he
I don't know
jokes
why.
because he is well, and obviously, and this is not something that I'm drawn to, but like my ex-husband, white, like really, really white. And you
Like
know,
Irish white?
Yeah, Scotch Irish white.
Yeah.
That's why I ended up with a redhead. One
Yeah.
of my sons, my youngest son's a redhead.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's really interesting how that plays out, but it's clear we have kind of our attractions to people, right?
Oh, yeah.
And what we consider attractive is not necessarily what somebody else thinks is attractive, but I'm very attracted to whatever reason. White guys. Did I just say that publicly? I think I just did.
Yeah.
So I can't
Yeah.
take that back anymore.
You heard it here, folks. Carol's into white dudes. The milkier, the better.
Oh, shush.
Janet, I
Yeah.
gotta know. I'd love for you to share something with us that most people just don't know about you.
Oh, probably one of my, God, so many things.
Oh,
Well,
I like this.
We
Where
got
should
time. We can go through them
all. What's something most people don't know about me? Oh yeah, I got I suppose when I was very young, about 21, I started a movie, and it was a feature film. And then I was given the lead role in a soapie. And I went to the party and everything. And then I just had this sense that if I go down this track, it's not going to end well.
Yep.
I just, in the movie, and maybe it was just like an unfortunate experience, but all the lead actors who I'd only known as famous people on movie posters were assholes.
Never meet your heroes.
I hung out with the dog trainer and the runner. They were the only people that I found relatable on set. And I'm not saying that all actors are like this at all, because someone like Travis is talking about, if they can ground themselves in their truth, that's when they're really free to improv and show up in all these different guises. And that's the beauty of acting at that level. But if it is coming from the egoic self, it can be really toxic. And so those people generally were, in my humble opinion at that age when I knew absolutely nothing, but I just felt that they were vastly neurotic and insecure. And did I want my life to be surrounded by those people? So I rang my agent and I said, I'm out and I'm not doing the PR. I'm not doing anything.
You want to know something though? That's so wise for your age. At that young of age, to be able to recognize that says volumes.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Carol. I think there was a bit of wisdom there, even though I did massive, stupid, dumb things. But there was just a little voice in me that said, Janet, if you do this, you know how it's going to get, you know how it's going to end. You're going to get thrown out on the shit heap of life. In a few years' time, you'll have your little moment of glory and you'll think that's who you are. And then you'll live the rest of your life feeling miserable and depressed and a failure. And I wasn't thinking that consciously, but it was just a sense of, do I really want to hang out with these people where it's just a bitch fest and, you know, who can scratch each other's eyes out the fastest and grab the glory. There was
so much negativity.
Yeah, so much negativity and insecurity, and seeing it in these women who are a bit older than me, because I was the young, bright thing with no wrinkles. And
Oh
no
my
acting
God. I bet you
experience.
they were coming after you,
Oh
just
God, yeah,
jealous as all
no.
can be. Yeah.
Well, there's no talking to me on set or anything. It was just like awful. And I thought, wow, this is what goes on behind the scenes. And I'm sure that's not true at a certain level, right? I'm sure that's not true, obviously.
We would
but
hope it's not true.
yeah,
We're
but at the
projecting.
level I was playing at, it was definitely true. And so I
Yeah.
basically went back to washing dishes in the cafe I was running with my then boyfriend, who 40 years later we're still together.
Oh,
Yeah, so I
that.
settled so in that sense, I settled for the small life, as in the non-celebrity life. But there was greatness in that small life, you know.
Yes.
There was greatness in that small life, you know, getting married, having children, experiencing life from the trenches and going through it that way. Yeah.
Really, truly experiencing life.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I did my share of shit, and I paid for it for most of my life, living in that place that we call the overcompensating self, where we try and be the good person, the worthy person. It's so exhausting.
It's
so I lived most of my
sacrificing.
life
It's
there.
self-sacrificing. Sorry,
Yeah.
self-sacrificing is what it is.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
You know, there's
So
a
what
lot of
else?
people. I was going to say real quick, there's a lot of people that suffer from that. And the answer is not less love or less kindness, but they have to give themselves the equal measure of love and kindness to themselves. Because when you're
Yeah,
out of
agreed.
balance, that's the draining part, when you're not
Yeah.
showing yourself the love too. And that's hard. That's hard for a lot of people. It's easy to say, right? I can sit behind this camera and say that stuff all day. It's a lot harder to do. But once you do
Yeah.
it, you'll never look back.
Exactly. Well, I think that's where we circle back to Christopher Robin, and what a great example that character is, because he owned every part of himself, and we have to own every part of ourselves. But if we can't see it, that's very hard. So that's what I believe is the work to be done. It's bringing all those characters within us to the surface and going, you're okay. And maybe you, Eeyore, have been playing up a little bit too loud. So we're going to ask you to go and stand in the back row. We're not asking you to leave the stage. You're still there, but you've just been playing up a bit too loud. Is that okay? And asking permission of that character and getting their buy-in. And that's when we can start to show up as our true selves without, with the bits of us that are not seen are the bits that cause the damage. So if we can bring them under the spotlight, see them for ourselves and go, oh, it's not that bad, you know, then that's, I think, when we can show up without fear of what other people think of us, because they don't care anyway.
No. So what's another thing? I know you said there were so many things, but give us another example.
Yeah, well, I think there was a bit of an entrepreneurial spark there. I really did love making money. I loved the business of it. So when I was about 15, my mum would hold dinner parties, and I'd make the desserts. And in Australia, we have this dessert. And honestly, I don't know why it's so famous, because all it is a meringue shell with cream in the middle and fruit. And we call it a pavlova, after the Russian ballerina. Yeah, you know that. And so that was in the days where you could have a lemonade stand and people would buy you a glass of lemonade. So I just stuck a sign on the front door of our family home saying Janet's Pavlova Pantry, and, you know, with the prices. And then the phone started ringing. This is while I was still at school. And it was really funny. The business just grew and grew from word of mouth. So, you know, if you went into our kitchen on any day, there would be, because ants love pavlovas. That's the issue. You have to put them in a place where the ants can't get them. So I have a few ant stories I could share, but so
termites, ants, donkeys.
Yeah, that's right.
All.
There's an insect theme going on here.
Yeah,
what's that about? Let's talk about AI next. No, but so it became like almost too successful, to the point where my dad dragged us off to France for a year when I was 16, and he basically became a student and just studied ears from the leading authority in the world at the time, and he was on no money for a year. So when we came back, the only car he could afford was a little Lancer. I don't know if you remember those, but they're just like a little car. They're not a big station wagon, which is what you really need for delivering pavlovas. So So Dad would kind of take off his surgeon's outfit and be my chauffeur on the weekends as we drove the Pavlovas around, to various functions. And I'd had to cater for this big function where we were doing pavlovas and cheesecakes and mousses and all kinds of things. And everyone in the family had 3 or 4 different desserts on their lap and holding them. The car was just basically a pavlova shop on wheels. And my dad wasn't the best driver, so he was a little bit vague.
Rough. Yeah.
He was great at removing tumors from someone's brain, but not so good at negotiating a crossroads. And so we would just beetling along. And my mum said, Barry, watch out. There's a car on the right. He slammed on the brakes. And you can just imagine what happened. It was like all the desserts were put through a blender in the space of 3 seconds. And he just turned around me with this very straight face. And he said, Janet, I think you need to focus on your studies. So Dad,
I think you need to focus on driving.
Yeah, that's right. I was too busy piecing the meringue back together, which we did end up delivering. But I think what I got from that was the joy of having my own money and buying. I bought 2 things. I bought a bicycle and I bought a boat, just a little dinghy. And they're still my 2 most precious possessions. So I just loved the trading aspect of that, putting goods out there, receiving payment, and then buying stuff that I really cherished. And I think that's followed me through my life, actually.
Well, it's something about your relationship with money too, is appreciating that, right?
Ooh,
and we talk about the relationship of money and the way people perceive money, and it's not evil. If we're okay with understanding money is just a tool, and instead of this evil, which I have a girlfriend that talks about money like it's so evil, and I go, but it pays your bills and it allows you freedom to do what you want. So why is it so evil to you? And it's because she sees it from the viewpoint of the people, the wealthy have all of it. And I said, well, if that was true, then you'd have none of it. So why is this such a hard topic for you to grasp? And until she got better with understanding what money meant to her, and when she finally did, it was great to have a conversation with her, because she finally realized it's just a tool. That's it. And her relationship with money improved significantly, where we could talk about investments, where we could talk about those things. And it didn't go into this bitter, oh my God, the rich people have it all. I'm like, oh my God, it's like talking to a brick wall,
It's funny you talk about that, because I grew up in trailer parks and foster homes, and the way we used to talk about the rich, really, when I go back to that era, go back to that town, it was like I was being insanely jealous and mean to like the lower middle class that I thought was so wealthy from my point of view. And it's you have these conversations, people are like, oh, Elon Musk, just like tax the rich. I'm like, tax them all you want. They don't have an income. Like, they don't have, it's not like they've got a Scrooge McDuck money bin full of money that they go swimming in every night, right? They're all tied up in assets or stock futures or all these different things, the valuation of their company. It's not like they're walking around with like, I don't know, $1 billion debit card they can just swipe endlessly on whatever they're wanting to buy. Like, all of that stuff that's created, all of the things that they do take care of so many families.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Have you guys ever done any past life regression work?
No.
Where you go back into the past. And I totally buy into what you're saying, Carol, about reincarnation and coming back. I totally believe that. So if you believe that, you have to believe the opposite too, that you've come from somewhere, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And that's interesting what that can throw up, because funnily enough, I did have a lot of money issues, although I loved that living in exchange. And that's still my core need is prosperity, which I define as the learning the art of giving and receiving. The receiving part can be the challenging part. But that for me, if I have a vision for my life and for the life of others, is that we all may prosper doing what we love and making a decent living out of it. And that is way trickier than it sounds.
No, for sure. But I totally agree. But people, if you look at, we talk about love, right? Being able to give love and receive it. But many of us can give it, but we have a hard time receiving it. right?
Yeah.
And if we treat it like a door, I always tell people, if you close that door after you give it, that means you can't receive it. And then pretty soon you can't give it back out because you've closed that door. But if you keep the door open, it's this open avenue and pathway to be able to give and receive. People forget that, you know, you can't just say, I'm going to give it to you, shut the door, slam it, and, you know, that's it, right? Because then you can't receive it, but now you also can't give it back out. And I think it's really important for people to realize you have to do everything with an open heart. Everything has to be open.
There's that other side of that too. There's people that are willing to receive, but they're not willing to give.
True. It's a door.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Buy my stuff all day long. Buy. Absolutely. It's great. Buy, pay me. Well, hey, we have this other service that you could use. I'm not going to put my money out there to work, even though it's to my benefit. I'm only just going to be receiving. Does that have the same effect?
Yeah. Well, we have to be able to, it's a cycle, right? And all of us have to give and receive. It's not just a one-way street.
But does it work the other way where you're willing to receive, but you're not willing to give? Like you'll take payment, but you're not willing to pay for other people's services?
Well, again, it's that open the door back and forth. And if we all want to, from what Janet's saying, prosper, right? There has to be the cycle of giving and receiving.
Yeah. I don't know if you guys have done past life work, and this is where it might sound hippy dippy, and you'll have thousands of people leaving the podcast at this point. I take full responsibility. But let's just, going back to the whole topic of exploring the terrain that is ourselves, and because I do believe that's probably the next frontier, given where AI is going. It's leaving us no choice but to understand who we fully are so that we can fully show up. And one of the dimensions that can bring us to is lives before our own. And it's really interesting where that can lead. And obviously you approach all of this with an open mind, but it's almost like your system picks up information that it needs to weave together the mat that you are, to make sense of the fabric of your life. And the relationship with money is so interesting because it's one of our key relationships, right? It's like a really important relationship. If you don't have enough money, you don't have roof overhead or food on table, you're not surviving, so really, really important. And yet we seem so bad at it. And I think it's really worth looking at, why is that so? And so I've done past life work, which threw up some interesting things, but it came off the back of doing a lot of work on myself in this life. And again, we talk about our environment and the programming of my parents. And I remember one day when I was about 5 years old, and we had this girl, Julie, who was about 14, and she was kind of like my babysitter. There was a housing commission, it's like public housing just in our street down the road. And she would come and do odd jobs in our garden and sweeping leaves and things. And my mum and dad would pay her to do that. And so one day I decided I wanted to be like Julie. So I spent the whole afternoon, sweeping the lawn and the path. And I said to Daddy, can I get paid now? And he looked at me in horror, what? You don't just do that because you want to contribute to your family. And I just remember that look of horror in his face. And suddenly I felt this emotion, which I didn't know at the time, but it was shame. It was like, how dare you ask to be paid? It was like that. And then fast forward to when I was about 13. And I was a pretty little thing back in the day. And my mum's and I had some photos done, and the photographer said, Janet should do a bit of modeling. So mum, after school, I'd go and do modeling. But I didn't tell anyone because it was in the days of women's liberation. It was really uncool to objectify your body, right? So I didn't tell my friends or anything. And then my best friend came up to me one day at school and said, again, with that look of horror on her face, she said, "Oh, Janet, I was feeding my cat last night and laying out the newspaper, and there was a photo of you in the newspaper. What are you doing?" And I said, "Oh, yeah." And I just kind of, threw it away. And she said, "Oh, I can't believe you'd prostitute yourself like that." And so that was like, ooh, okay. Oh. And then fast forward to when I was 20 and doing a BA, a communications degree. And everyone was studying the media and talking about how men were manipulating women and subliminal advertising and all of that. And I said to my best friend, oh, I've just got a job in advertising. And she said, oh, and that look of horror again, oh, Janet, how could you prostitute yourself? And I'm going, what's this theme coming up all the time? And then that movie that I was starring in, I was playing a double role. And one of them was, you guessed it, a prostitute. And I'm going, isn't that interesting? When we can helicopter above our life, we start to see patterns. We start to see little dots, like little signals. And at the time, they meant nothing. They were just throwaways. But when you start to see a theme running through your life, you go, what the hell is that about? So sure enough, when I did that past life work, in a past life, I was a courtesan, as they nicely referred to it at the time. Prostitutes, actually, I'm just going to say something here. Back in the day, going back a couple of thousand years before religion got in the way, actually had a really useful service to play, because as the saying goes, they took the war out of men. When men came off the battlefield, they didn't go straight home as raving maniacs. They went to the brothel and, got all that excess energy and, bloodlust out of their system via the prostitute who was providing this service, so they could then go back to their family as kind of, a more balanced person. So that particular role has been demeaned and misunderstood. But that was actually, I believe, a theme that was running in my life, in my subconscious mind, that making money equated to selling your soul, essentially. And I know that I got that also from my father, because when we died, we discovered he'd done all these operations, worth thousands and thousands of dollars, and not charged for them, because he saw that as not noble. And
but he self-sacrificed, but he also
self-sacrificed,
not just self-sacrificed, but didn't allow his family to benefit. Because not taking fair payment, it was bad for your family. I mean, if he had taken fair payment, things would, not that you need more money, but if he was fairly paid, then your family would have prospered the way it should have.
Well, this is
absolutely,
there's a line that this also applies to most American-based nonprofits, and I'm assuming a good portion of the world, is they refuse to set up their organization in a way that they can get paid for all their time, energy, and effort. That it's no, I've got to be the hero. I've got to be a martyr for my cause. If I'm not in pain, if I'm not suffering as I'm doing this, it's not actually worth anything. And that's one of the reasons I stopped my other show, the Nonprofit Architect Podcast, because I was so tired of hearing people that wouldn't care for themselves in the slightest. They wouldn't cultivate their team. They wouldn't learn how to do nonprofit work. They wouldn't put a system in place that they could run without them. They had to be the one that had, the Superman cape underneath the suit, right? They had to be the one that was the savior. They had to be the one that was hurting. They had to be the one. It was like penance that they were paying. It's
like, again, the poor relationship with your viewpoint of money, And if you can just accept money for what it is, and it's just really an exchange for products and services, and you just receive payment for it. There's nothing wrong with money. People are just really uncomfortable about talking about it, and they want to look like these heroes. But at the end of the day, this is for a nonprofit. If you don't bring in income, that nonprofit no longer exists.
Yeah, you can't serve the population that you're trying to serve.
Right. You can't make the impact you want to make. Absolutely.
As we're getting ready to wrap up here after just a phenomenal conversation, Janet, what advice would you have for someone that's maybe struggling in one of these areas?
I think the advice I would give is that we are programmed to look outwards, outside of ourselves, for the reason or the cause, and it's never there. It's never to be found outside of ourselves. If I can speak to myself, I know I was terrified of doing inner work, because my core destructive belief, as it turned out, was I'm not good enough because I'm an empty shell. So you scratch the surface and you go beneath the surface, there's nothing there. And so I was terrified of finding that truth out about myself. And so what I would say to anyone who is teetering on the edge going, I don't like the idea of inner work, honestly. I think I'm fine the way I am. that you will not only be not disappointed, you will be delighted at what you find if you have the willingness to peer beneath the surface of yourself.
Yeah, I fully agree. And what's the one place you want people to connect with you, Janet?
So the one place where they can connect with me is, well, to put it simply, actually, it's I probably just direct them to my website, www.janethogan.com. It says a little bit about me. And there's also my email, janet@janethogan.com. But, I have little tools and things that people can try at no charge. This is not fear of money speaking here, but I do know that there's a lot of apprehension and distrust of going down a rabbit hole of, I don't want to get caught up in an awkward situation, or I don't want to go into therapy, and this is not therapy at all. This is just an uncovering. It's an unlearning process, really. And to that end, I'm happy to share a tool that I have called the Triangle of Success, where in just a few minutes, you can actually discover what your core need is and what your true self really requires right now. And that gives you a North Star to follow. And you would be amazed at how quickly you can pull that out of your system. It's there waiting to be discovered. And I'm more than happy to share that with people as well. Maybe we can include that in the notes, just so that in a few seconds, people can start to, if you're wondering about, well, what is my greatness? What does that mean? What's my meaning? What's my purpose? Your system knows all of that already. It knows it. It's just about how do you extract it. So I have tools that, just like a surgeon, a good surgeon's daughter, I have tools that will extract that information for a minimum amount of time investment so that you can get on with your life quicker than you probably realized.
Oh, no, absolutely. And as someone who has actually gone through Janet's whole Fifth Door program, I can honestly say that it was the thing that made the biggest impact on my life and my family. I did years of therapy, all sorts of other programs, and really could never get to the core of what it was that was bothering me. And even when I tried to hide it from Janet, she pulled it out of me.
I've got a nose for termites, that's for sure.
A nose for termites. It sounds exactly like what we're going to call this show. No, we're not going to call this show. No one will click on it. Like, termite nose? Really? Is she like the old carnival stuff, like the bearded lady and whatnot? Like, oh, termite nose. No, we're not going to be there. Janet, thank you so much for being our guest today. We really appreciate you coming here and sharing and showing us behind the curtain of all the stuff in your life.
Oh, thanks to you guys it's just been fun. I kind of forgot that we're recording. So I hope I don't listen to it and go, oh my God, did I say that? But no.
It's okay. It's those candid, authentic moments that, make it truly about you.
Yeah. No, you guys are doing an awesome job. I love your mission. So thank you.
Thank you.
That's all for this episode of Titan Evolution Podcast. We hope this no-holds-barred conversation opened your eyes on what it takes to live a genuinely happy life according to your own terms. Now that you've treated yourself to such a refreshing discussion, you cannot listen to nonsense content anymore. Be sure not to miss an episode by subscribing to the show at TitanEvolutionPodcast.com. Don't forget to share the word so more people can be enlightened, informed, and entertained. Thank you for listening.